Greetings. Start with the energy engineering subject. Unit number 2. We have now in last page of the unit 2 with lecture number 6 of the cooling towers. Before going to start with the new lecture on cooling towers, we have some brief about the last period, whatever we have discussed. We have seen layout of thermal power plant and where the cooling tower is there, position, layout in the layout, and what is the purpose of the cooling tower in the thermal power plant, and we explained with the cooling water circuit. Then we saw importance of cooling towers. Mainly, one is reduction of water quantity and also environmental effect due to chemical in the water droplets which flow along with the hot air in the atmosphere. They are also getting reduced by means of use of these drip eliminators. Then we saw different components of cooling tower with the help of a general layout, not this cooling tower for thermal power plants or large power plants. This type of cooling tower which I saw work in air conditioning system. So parts are same, nevertheless. That's why I have taken an example of this or general layout of cooling tower with the explanation of different parts. Drip eliminator to just it is at the top portion, and it just absorbs the, you can say, water droplets from the air and falls down. That eliminates the droplet. Spray nozzles and a header, PVC fouling, float wall, bleed wall, body. These are the general terms in the cooling towers. Cooling tower specification, one of the important point in this unit 2 requirement. Cooling water specification and requirements are what? So we have to consider while designing or while installing or a project, doing a project, new project of installation of cooling tower, you have to keep in mind what are the requirements and what are the two specifications of a cooling tower. So first we have to decide on the type of cooling tower, whether it is forced cooling, induced cooling, or natural drop cooling. Forced cooling uses the fan at the bottom. Induced drop cooling tower uses the fan at the top, and natural drop uses no fan. But the shape of the cooling tower can be used for the cooling of the hot water. Then second, design of cooling tower, for it may be cross flow cooling tower or counter flow. Cross flow design mixes air and water at 90-degree angle, vertical plane. Same counter flow, water falling from top and air entering from bottom. Motor power, the rating of the motor used to drive the fan in cooling tower. So you have to decide what power is required for the motor to extract the heat from the water. Accordingly, you have to decide choose the motor. Then cooling capacity, the rated volume of air that to be moved in the tower in a given time. It is rated in tons per hour, so that you have to calculate. Then that is the specification, you can say, and requirement for the new cooling tower. Flow rate, the flow rate is the cooling water through which the tower, during a given time. So I took 27,000 meter cube per hour for 210 megawatt hour and 33,000 meter cube per hour to 250 megawatt plants. Okay. Just we'll see, or we'll use the pin. Okay. Next, some basin capacity. We'll take the help of highlighter, laser painter. So some capacity. This is the catch basin, or somewhere we call it as a cooling pond, where the cooling water is collected you have to design the area of the cooling tower, and it's required again system how much you are circulating the water inside this cooling circuit. Then operating weight, the operating weight of the cooling tower, supply voltage AC or DC, supply phase single or three-phase supply, construction material, fiberglass reinforced PVC, wood construction, cooling water. Then we saw types of cooling water, natural force, and this induced in natural cooling tower. We saw what are the components: hyperbolic shape, drip eliminators, nozzles, fields, and cold dry air base, and lastly basin. The principle of working is same here, only the shape of the cooling tower makes the makes the heat exchange in the cooling tower, and cold water is being recirculated in the condenser. Okay, then we saw this natural cooling water actual in thermal power plant 250 megawatt. The shape of this like this, advantages and we demerits. We saw this high capacity cost performance varies. Then we saw the natural cooling towers, these nozzles, upward nozzles and downward nozzles. In some cases, it may be upward direction. In some cases, it is downward direction. So depending upon the type and the capacity also. So then we saw what are the type of the fill height, distribution pieces, cement material, then size, nozzles, types, down spray, up spray material, etc. Then we saw some dimensions of the tower, maximum diameter of the at the ceiling 104 at the bottom, at the in between it is 99.10, 59.27 at throat level, at top it is 62.73 meter, at trail level 101 means just here the you can say trail level means height. It is given this where the venturi is being or shape is the minimum shape. That level is 101.25 shown. Then we saw top of the shell, total length of the shell is 135 meters. Then we saw FD fans. Then in the FD fans we saw having a fan at the bottom and merits and demerits. Then induced draft plant, last one we saw in 210 megawatt, 10 cells are there, and the function of each, and what are the components and what work being carried out in this induced draft system. The method principle is same. Water falling down. There are two types: cross flow and counter flow. Water flowing downwards and water flowing downwards and air flowing from periphery, either periphery in cross flow or downwards in counter flow. So as heat exchange takes place and water droplets are limited in the drip eliminators and humid air then flows to the atmosphere due to induced draft fan, and the cold water which falling down in the cooling pot or some is being recirculated for cooling purpose. What are the works where they carried out? Then we saw this cross type, counter type. What are so this is the counter type flow cooling towers, IDCT. We worked. I had done a lot of work here in this city fans, cooling towers maintenance works. So various works were carried out. Advantages and there, that also we discussed. 10 cells are there in the 10 to 10 megawatt with two risers, left side and right side. Water flowing, hot water flowing through the headers, to the subheaders, then nozzles, then falling down on the fills, and fills getting water getting cooled due to the cold air rushing in due to the draft induced in the cooling tower. As the fan rotates, the pressure drop takes place below the fan, and the pressure due to the pressure difference, the cold air rush into the cooling tower towards the lower pressure zone, and while doing so, it carries the heat from the hot water, and then it takes it to the atmosphere as shown in the figure. Okay. Then we saw in modern power plant IDCT is that fan is that the top Venturi shape again, but it is different, little different than NDCT. Then cross flow, we have seen periphery, 90-degree exit, hot water and cold air mixing in along the periphery. All the components are same as shown in the figure. And again, some advantages and disadvantages we saw. Then this is a counterflow induced draft cooling tower. Okay, now today we'll start with the next topic of this cooling tower. That is lecture number 6. So we'll proceed. Comparison between NDCT and IDCT, natural draft cooling tower and industrial draft cooling tower. Few points we'll discuss. I have shown figures, natural draft and industrial draft. No mechanical moving part in NDCT. Here, mechanical moving parts, fan, gearboxes, motors, etc. Practically no maintenance. Here, more maintenance is required due to moving parts. Maintenance cost is negligible in natural draft, whereas in the case of sorry. Okay, so NDCT, no mechanical moving part, practically no maintenance, maintenance cost is negligible. Mechanical in IDCT, mechanical moving parts, more maintenance, maintenance cost is more. Does not require electric power, hence saving in auxiliary consumption. Require electric power about 1 megawatt, depending upon tower size. Tower performance is increased on increasing the load, but it is in reverse in case of IDCT. Tower can be located near the plant as it requires less area, and it is located away from the main plant as it requires more area. NDCT can handle very large heat load, whereas IDCT is economical for low heat loads. So low heat means heat exchange is taking place more in case of NDCT, whereas it's taking less in IDCT. Now we are going to study the important topic, one more important topic of this cooling towers with slideshow, please. Okay, so we are going to see two types: direct type of air cooled or dry cooling towers and indirect cooling towers. Indirect cooling towers, you can see here the picture. The exhaust stream coming from the turbine is taken to the header of the condenser. This condenser having subheaders. That's again you are seeing there are number of tubes inside this header. When the exhaust stream flows through the condenser header and subheaders, you can say the fan is installed below the condenser, and this due the atmospheric air rushing in and flows over the condenser tubes or condenser headers, subheaders, so that the heat transfer takes place between hot air and the direct condenser to what condensate or steam to condense it into the water, and that cold water then is circulating with the help of pump to the boiler for regeneration of steam. So you here in this case you will see there is no cooling tower at all. It is directly or dry cooling. It is hence it is called as direct type or dry. There is no water required here for cooling this condensate or steam, exhaust steam coming from there. So they are called as dry cooling towers also. So advantages: reduction in cooling tower water requirement. So very less water is required, or no water is. Reduction in thermal pollution caused by evaporation, applicable for only small power plants. Disadvantage: large diameter of pipes for exhaust steam, hence capital costs increases. So this is about a direct type air cooled or dry cooling towers. Just we saw advantages, disadvantages. Okay, then we'll see another type, indirect or Heller dry type cooling tower system. The name again implies itself. In indirect type air cooled or dry cooling, or indirect type dry cooling towers. Earlier we saw this natural draft
induced draft, forced draft. This somewhat different, direct cooling and indirect cooling. We'll see again. You just see the figure, you'll get the idea from the figure itself. So the explanation is given at the left side, and the explanation, the figure is on the right side. Just I will explain with the figure so that you can get the clear idea. So the exhaust steam coming from the turbine is taken into the condenser. So what happens in the condenser? You see, the condenser heat exchange takes place between the condenser and you can say hot heat. Exhaust steam is transferred to the cold water pumped from the air cooled heat exchanger located inside the container. So what happens actually? So the cold water coming from the dry cooling tower is being sprayed over the tubes or of the exhaust steam, which is inside the tubes, and this flows, cold water flows over these tubes, and then tubes or shell, whatever it may be. If you say with the tubes, then this water flowing over the tubes or the condenser by or the direct surface contact, by means of surface contacts, heat exchange takes place. Then that condensate is taken to the boiler for regeneration of steam, and the water which is getting hot is now he see here. Now what this one pump is here is being circulated in the cooling tower. What is the cooling tower here? See, so this water goes through the tubes. See what is the difference in earlier cases and now. So the water flows through, hot water flows through the tubes. You can see here, these are the tubes, and while flowing through the tubes, air from the atmosphere flows over the tubes. So there is no direct contact of water and air here also. In this case, there is an indirect contact of air and water, which causes the water to get condensed, or water get cooled, sorry, not condensed, and that cold water is reused in the condenser. So here is again tube shell type of heat exchanger. Here also tube and shell type of heat exchanger. Here in this condenser, water flows over the tubes, and then this condensate is used to boiler, whereas the hot water is going come from the pump, circulating pump, flows over the through the tubes, and air from the atmosphere rush in, maybe due to the fan installed here, and that causes the heat exchange to take place in this shell and tube type of cooling tower, and cold water is then recirculated for cooling purpose. So this is explained in this way. Air is introduced to flow across the exterior surface of the heat exchanger to cool the hot air inside the exchanger tube. The cooled water inside the heat exchanger tube is then pumped back to the condenser. The turbine exhaust is condensed by circulating water rather by ambient air directly, hence it gets the indirect cooling. So here there is no direct air. So air is here. So air, so and water is here. So indirect cooling is taking place inside this. Here also indirect cooling is taking place. Here is also indirect cooling. Hence the name is given indirect type of air cooled or dry cooling towers. So next one we'll see. So this is about the dry dry cooling towers and in direct and indirect air cooling towers, or direct, and that is one of the important topics in this cooling towers. Last one is cooling ponds. As we have seen, the cooling pond is one of the simplest method of cooling the condensed water. This method is less efficient than cooling water. We have seen, we just name cooling tower. There are also types of cooling towers in small power plants which are used. In larger power plant, the cooling pond is at larger size, and then it is after cooling that cooling water is taken to the condenser from the cooling ponds through strainers in the larger power plants. Whereas in some other moderate and smaller power plants, there are the types of cooling ponds. One is a natural and direct flow cooling pond. Second one is single deck and double deck cooling pond. And third one is open and lower fence cooling pond. One of the three of we'll see here. So this hot in natural and directed flow cooling pond, what happens? Hot water comes from condenser flow and flows into the pond, and by natural cooling, the cold water is then taken to the condenser. There is no any uh, tower and all these things in such ponds. So natural cooling is taking place, and that natural, after cooling, it is taken to the condenser. In direct flow cooling pond, you can see cold water to condense, hot water coming from the condenser here. So hot water coming from the condenser is flowing like this, coming in this way and going upward in the upward pass. And again, means there are two passes. You can see our number of passes. When they are going to into the number of passes, they are get cooled. So here, hence it's called as a directed flow cooling pond. So while passing through the number of stages, the hot water gets cooled, and that cooled water is taken to the condenser by this way. In single deck cooling pond, by means of direction of flow of the water gets cooled. In single deck cooling pond, you are seeing the hot water from condenser coming in the form spray nozzles we saw in one of the examples. So at the top, upward of spray nozzles, and then while falling down, they get cooled with the help of air, and indirectly taken to the cooling pond, and that cold water is taken with the help of pump to the condenser. So this is a single deck. Again, you can say double deck means double pond, and same principle. And in this way, this cooling ponds working is there. Just a short note may be asked on this point. What do you mean by cooling pond? What are the types of cooling ponds? Explain any one of the ponds with needs gauge. So that I have shown 3 for your reference. I hope you understood this. So in this topic today, we saw direct type of cooling tower, indirect type of cooling tower, and then what are the cooling ponds. This finishes the topic of cooling tower. In next class, we'll see the environmental impacts of thermal power plant. Okay. Thank you very much.